Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a channel to see the world from a different angle. Even though YouTube demonetized our channel over a year ago, and we are not allowed to earn income from our videos, we continue our work and remain independent. This episode is dedicated to Sherry, who has supported our work incessantly over the past 2 years. We start today's video with the tension between the US and China, which has been worsening recently for various reasons. Our focus today is on political correctness and independent journalism in the West. A report from the Associated Press revealed that the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps, led by the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, were holding joint exercises in the South China Sea. It was the second time this year that the Carrier Strike Group entered the South China Sea. In a previous video, we mentioned that the USS Nimitz Carrier is a Grandpa-class ship with nearly 5 decades of service life since 1975. Still, it is flexing its wrinkles and muscles in the Indo-Pacific region. According to the Associated Press, the Japan-based 7th Fleet announced on February 12, 2023, that the USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group and the 13th Marine Expeditionary Unit have been conducting integrated expeditionary strike force operations in the South China Sea. It integrates U.S. maritime, onshore, and air forces in the so-called Indo-Pacific region. For quite a long time, the U.S. has constantly opposed China's artificial island construction in the South China Sea. Many amphibious platforms in the joint exercise should have considered the geographical locations of those Chinese artificial islands, and the U.S. military is rehearsing island capture operations there. China has built several islands in the past years, and they are like dozens of unsinkable aircraft carriers, and as a result, 1 or 2 U.S. carrier groups cannot pose a real threat to the Chinese army there. The South China Sea is vast, but China's military satellites can easily detect and track U.S. ships. With hypersonic heads or not, Beijing's middle and long-range missiles can target invading vessels in seconds. According to a White House spokesperson, the U.S. military shot down some suspicious spy balloons, among which were some American balloons possibly released by America's used car dealers. We must point out that China's spy satellites outperform those balloons blown astray from Xinjiang. The photos they send back to Beijing could even vividly expose wrinkles on U.S. soldiers' faces. The survival of the U.S. Carrier Strike Group in the South China Sea is doubtful, and it is even more difficult for other amphibious combat forces in that region. The frequency of U.S. military activities for China's siege will become more stringent and tight. In the past weeks of 2023, the U.S. military has conducted multiple military exercises surrounding China. We cannot rule out the possibility that the U.S. military will create more trouble in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. Although the U.S. government has never announced that it will abandon its strategic ambiguity strategy on the Taiwan Strait issue, the U.S. military does not hide its attempt to use the Taiwan Strait issue to contain and suppress China. The Pentagon just sent its top China official, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Michael Chase, to visit Taiwan. This visit could aggravate tensions between China and the U.S., 2 nuclear powers. A Chinese netizen said the U.S. could shoot down China's weather balloon, and Beijing should also shoot down warplanes that invaded China's sovereignty. Even though some media outlets in Taiwan and the West claim Taiwan is a country, Beijing relentlessly claims its right to Taiwan, referring to it as an inseparable part of China. In August 2022, when Nancy Pelosi visited the island, the Chinese army conducted unprecedented exercises surrounding Taiwan. Michael Chase's visit is more provoking than Nancy Pelosi's when the fight over the Chinese weather balloon has fermented a diplomatic crisis between the two countries. Since the U.S. established formal relations with Beijing, no longer recognizing Taiwan as the representative of China, it had refrained from sending high-rank officials to Taiwan before Joe Biden became the U.S. president. We often say Joe Biden is more sophisticated than Donald Trump, and he is also more dangerous. The U.S. is getting worse under his presidency, and the world is also on the verge of World War III because of America's involvement in the Ukraine conflict. The Chinese balloon saga has further exposed the idiocy of the Biden administration in covering its domestic problems with international occurrences. We have not seen many reports about the Nord Stream explosions since a Pulitzer Prize-winning American journalist, Seymour Hersh, claimed that the Central Intelligence Agency of the U.S. carried out a covert operation in the September 2022 bombing of 3 Nord Stream gas pipelines. The German foreign minister said the West is at war with Russia. Even though Joe Biden says he does not want to fight with Russians directly to avoid a world war, he does believe cutting off Russia's natural gas to Europe can harm Moscow and European countries at the same time. Many people have realized that America's targets include Germany, as the European Union, led by Berlin and Paris, is also a direct competitor to Washington. Joe Biden has successfully fooled Germany into providing its tanks to Ukraine, while the U.S. cannot send American tanks to Kyiv quickly due to various problems. The United States has indeed sent military aid in billions to Ukraine, hoping the Ukraine war could worsen Russia with the last drop of Ukrainian people's blood. Still, the so-called military aid to Kyiv is not free of charge, unfortunately. The U.S. government is reportedly asking Ukraine to foot the bill. Ukraine is not only short of money, but it is also short of cannon fodder, so it is forcibly recruiting anyone on the street to resist the enemy. When the war broke out 1 year ago, Ukraine removed the age limit for its people to join the army, so people under 18 and beyond 60 could defend the country. Even disabled Ukrainians are now asked to join the army, and the country's national leader is urging other nations to send Ukrainian refugees back to fight the Russians. While Ukraine is in such a miserable situation, the United States will lose its moral high ground if Joe Biden forces Kyiv to pay back Washington's military aid. As advocated by mainstream Western media and politicians, the West cares more for freedom, democracy, and human rights than for money. Why should Ukraine pay for the cost of the proxy war after losing their limbs and even lives? NATO has tried its best to help Ukraine fight Russia and prolong the war, except by formally sending its troops to the battlefield. Ironically, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg will likely win the Nobel Peace Prize. In January 2023, he was nominated for the prize, notorious for having disputable winners to the detriment of world peace. Suppose Joe Biden could live long enough. He could win the prize for the Ukraine war, like Barack Obama and Theodore Roosevelt. We need to introduce Theodore Roosevelt. He was the first U.S. president to win the Nobel Peace Prize. He participated in many wars and was regarded as one of America's great heroes. He also made the Chinese Exclusion Act permanent, openly opposing Chinese, like Donald Trump discriminating against Muslims 1 century later. In previous videos, we said mainstream Western media promote Western values to manipulate the world. The Nobel Peace Prize is merely one of their political tools. In recent years, when China became the primary threat to America's hegemony, Beijing was labeled the worst dictatorship in human history, and anything China does is wrong. 2 Chinese dissenters, Dalai Lama and Liu Xiaobo, were Nobel Peace Prize winners. Let us return to the saga of the so-called Chinese spy balloon, and discuss why the Western mainstream media incessantly hyped the threat of a Chinese weather balloon to divert their audience's attention from America's headaches. On February 3, a train carrying hazardous chemicals derailed in Ohio, causing a massive leak of vinyl chloride, isobutylene, and other toxic gases. 11 days later, a tanker carrying hazardous chemicals overturned after a collision in Arizona, leaking highly toxic and corrosive nitric acid. The following day, a chemical storage tank was on fire at the port of Catoosa in Tulsa County, Oklahoma. The Chinese weather balloon was blown astray into American airspace. It was 18,000 meters above sea level, equivalent to 600,000 feet in the sky. Still, the United States found it, and all the U.S. Congress members condemned its use. No one condemned the leak of toxic gases, and few, if not zero, mainstream media highlighted the danger. The leakage harmed the environment, polluting the air and waterways, but mainstream media paid more attention to a harmless Chinese weather balloon, not the toxic gases. The U.S. government's controlled burn of those gases might cause further damage to the environment and residents in affected areas. If Beijing had done this, overwhelming criticism should have flooded online and offline media. The alleged Chinese balloon attack saga also covered the Nord Stream explosion scandal. Russia was blamed for using natural gas as a weapon to threaten European countries, so they would not side with the U.S. to sanction Moscow. As a result, the US, or another Western nation, had a reason to destroy the Russian pipelines. When the 84-year-old Pulitzer Prize-winning American journalist, Seymour Hersh, published his report that the U.S. government directed and implemented the Nord Stream pipeline's explosions, the White House immediately denied that it should be held accountable for those terrorist attacks. Mainstream media also refrained from spreading the influence of Seymour Hersh's explosive report. They collectively keep silent. When we search Seymour Hersh on Google, only 6 pages are displayed with outdated results. Independence is a fundamental principle in journalism, but independent journalism has become a joke, and political correctness already overrides freedom of speech. Even the most famous artificial intelligence application, ChatGPT, provides America's politically correct answers to its users. DFTW is never politically correct, unfortunately. We do not blame the platform for demonetizing our channel with the excuse that we provide no value to viewers. We also do not blame it for removing our subscribers. It is part of the propaganda war, so it thinks that DFTW should not express different opinions from the mainstream media. Still, DFTW will not keep quiet, although we can only update the channel weekly because of financial difficulties. We extend our great thanks again to Sherry and other supporters for keeping DFTW alive for over a year without sacrificing its independence. Life is tough, but DFTW is not giving up.